An Explicit DVD, Blu Ray and VHS update, take 1. Ten seconds. 5 seconds. 4, 3. So hello everybody, and welcome to another DVD, Blu Ray and VHS update. Not as much of a long gap as the last time, but I've still got a fairly decent amount of stuff. The next one will probably be at the end of the year, probably. It's become a bit of a tradition for me. But anyway, we'll get started. So it's Blu-rays, DVDs, and one VHS tape, and I'll actually show you the VHS tape first. And it is The Keep, a Michael Mann film, considered by many to be his lost masterpiece. I don't think I'd call it a masterpiece, but very interesting film in the sense that Michael Mann, who also directed films like Manhunter, Heat, and a few others. Thief as well. He largely disowned this because of the sheer amount of studio interference. In fact, there's a director's cut out there which is even longer. But that director's cut's never seen the light of day, and to this day this film is quite difficult to get on digital video disc, digital versatile disc rather. The only place this film actually has a DVD release is Australia, and that particular DVD came out in 2020, so that came out of not that long ago really, whereas everywhere else in the world it's stuck on VHS. This is the UK post-cert VHS release. I believe this tape was a HMV exclusive tape, but I really don't know. It's really just people on eBay saying it's HMV exclusive. There was also a pre-cert release of this from 1984, which is even more expensive than this tape is. I've managed to get it for about 15 quid, which is, I know, a bit much for a tape, but it usually goes for far, far more than that, so I'm perfectly happy. This tape was released in 2000. And it's an alright film. It's one of those films where I think it kind of didn't really live up to its potential. There's a lot of stuff not particularly right with it, but you know, it's still a very, very interesting film, and I didn't mind watching it. I don't think I would, if this film ever got a Blu-ray release in this country, I don't think I'd upgrade to the Blu-ray, but I'm still happy with the VHS, and the VHS is in really good condition as well, so I can live with that. Anyway, here's the tape. No evidence of a print date. Fortunately, one thing that I found very nice about the tape is it's not copy protected. I thought it would have been because it's a big studio tape from 2000, so I thought it would have been copy protected, but it's not, which was handy for me so that I could make a digital copy of it. So, yeah, we'll move on to the Blu-rays. First Blu-ray we've got is Akira, the first proper breakthrough anime film, I would say, worldwide. Anime has always been a particularly hard sell for me. It's the kind of thing I probably would enjoy if I actually gave it a go, but really anime mostly doesn't seem like my cup of tea, and I don't know why, because I mean I've seen a fair few Studio Ghibli films which I've absolutely loved. But yeah, this is an absolutely great film, very interesting film. I can see why it's so influential as an anime film. And based on a serialized manga, which I believe they did have to kind of rush the plot through quite a bit because the manga was still going at the time, and as a result they had to make their own ending for it. I've never read the original manga, but I can imagine it's an improvement. But yeah, here's the disc. And it's like we have a reversible sleeve. and we also get a digital code. Feel free to use that because it expired back in 2021. Yeah, that was Akira. Then we've got another animation film next. Oh man, Heavy Metal. I saw this on Netflix a few years ago. A very, very interesting adult animation film from the early 80s based on the Heavy Metal magazine. It feels very much like a Ralph Bakshi film in a way, with like the animation style and the fact that pretty much all the female characters get their tits out at least once in this film. In fact, a lot of people believe this was a Ralph Bakshi film, but it wasn't. Ralph Bakshi had nothing to do with it. It's not a great film. It's very hit or miss. I think it depends really on the type of person you are, whether or not you're going to get a lot of it. But I didn't mind it, so hence why I bought it on Blu Ray. It's an anthology film, and like with most anthology films, a lot of the segments are very hit or miss. But yeah. And there was a hilarious South Park episode that parodied this as well, so yeah. Anyway, here's the disc. Next one is Miller's Crossing. This is a Coen Brothers film. Very good film. Not the Coen Brothers' strongest one in my opinion, but it's still really good. Yep. Here's the disc. I'm not really the biggest fan of the cover design on this one because it looks a bit like winter, probably because it's really white. It looks a bit like winter and the snow. The film doesn't take place at winter, and there's no snow anywhere in the film, even in that particular scene, which is a great scene. Yeah, I think like more orangey colours, like on the original DVD cover and the original posters, would have suited it better, but it's still a nice cover. Next one is Face Off with John Travolta and Nicolas Cage. Very, very good film. A very, very daft action film. The premise is a bit ridiculous, but it's still a very enjoyable film. I believe this was John Woo's first big film outside of Hong Kong, I think, is where John Woo's from. But yeah, John Travolta, he plays the goodie and he also plays the baddie, same with Nicolas Cage. But yeah, very, very enjoyable film. Very, if you're into your action films, it's highly recommended, but I think most people have already seen it. And again, here's the disc. It's bland and blue because it's a Disney disc and Disney are cheap. Next up, we've got a Steven Seagal film, Marked for Death. This was the last of his early films I wanted to get. After this, I'm not going to bother with the rest. Probably because of Steven Seagal's, like, not only his politics, but also the fact that a lot of his later films are a little less to be desired. This is considered one of his better films, and I do agree it's a quite good action film. I don't think it's Seagal's strongest film, and it is a tiny bit racist. But thing is, the film is just so bizarre that I can't help but enjoy it. I mean, it's Steven Seagal and it's got black magic and shit, you know. But yeah. Here's the disc. Next one is ReAnimator. I've been wanting to get this film on Blu-ray for a while. Fantastic little horror comedy based on a H.P. Lovecraft story. It's a great film. So many great lines in it. It's about a guy who can resurrect people with the power of Mountain Dew. So, yeah, I think that's sold anyone. yeah. Here are the discs. This includes 2 cuts of the film. This includes the unrated version, which I think was the version I've seen, and the integral version. The integral version is a version that was made specifically for showing on television, where they, because the thing is, it was quite common back in the day where they screen different cuts of films for TV. Usually, if it's a horror film, they would usually cut out a lot of the violence, and usually add other shit in there to pad out the runtime. This version is exactly that. They put in some extra dialogue and shit to pad it out, and basically removed a lot of the violence. Although I don't know if this version still has the violence intact. I mean, it's an 18, so it probably just still the violence and stuff. But yeah, here's the alternative cover. This is the cover that it came with. And also something that's kind of nice is the fact that the 18 certificate and the second sight logo are still on the front of the reversible cover, which is odd because I've also got the Texas Chainsaw Massacre on the second sight, and on the reversible sleeve it doesn't have the certificate or the second sight logo on the front. But yeah, that's interesting. Next one is Zardos. Zardos. This is an absolutely insane film. Probably the quintessential so bad it's good movie. It's absolute crap. It's just so ridiculous, and pretty much everything that happens in it, but it's absolutely fucking hilarious. And I don't think the film was meant to be funny, which somehow made it even funnier. This is the second film Sean Connery did after quitting Bond, and you can kind of tell that he was just looking for a paycheck, because he basically, throughout most of the runtime, he runs around the film in a jockstrap and a red nappy. So that tells you a lot about the film, really. But yeah, I believe this was a John Boorman film, and I believe he was initially going to do a version of Lord of the Rings in the early 70s, but obviously that never went through, so he basically made his own fantasy film with some pretty mixed results. But yeah, I'd recommend watching YouTuber Shitcase Cinema. He did a hilarious review of this film. But yeah. And here's the disc, and inside we've got the reversible artwork. I think if you're drunk, you probably would get a lot of enjoyment out of this film because it's just hilarious. Anyway, here we have the booklet. And this shit came out. A little, as per typical Arrow titles, a little postcard with some of the titles available, specifically Blood Feast, which is a really good film as well, by the way. And then the final, well, sort of final Blu-ray is Run Crazy Summer, a Savage Steve Holland film, who also directed Better Off Dead. This is my second Warner Archive title, and I'm glad this film got chosen for release on the Warner Archive collection. This film I don't even think had a release beyond the rental VHS in this country, which is a real shame. But yeah, it's directed by Savage Steve Holland, who directed Better Off Dead, which is one of the craziest movies to ever come out of the 80s. I would say it's probably a bit more normal than Better Off Dead. It's not as good as Better Off Dead, but it's still absolutely fantastic. It's so funny. Really, kind of the only problem with it is John Cusack. You can kind of tell was kind of phoning his performance in a little bit, and that was because John Cusack had worked with Savage Steve Holland on Better Off Dead, and he really enjoyed working on that film. And then when Better Off Dead was finished, Savage Steve Holland did a screening of it, and basically John Cusack went up to him and said, This film is complete shit. You fooled me. You tricked me into being this film. If I didn't sign a contract to appear in your shitty next film, I would never work with you again. And then years later, John Cusack would go, "Oh, it wasn't that bad." Like, cut this shit, John Cusack. Yeah, from the sounds of that story, John Cusack does sound like a bit of a knob. But it's still a really, really good film. And it also stars Bobcat Goldthwait, Bobcat Goldthwait, everyone seems to hate him except me. Seriously, I'm like one of the 5 people on Earth who actually finds him hilarious. In fact, he was one of the few decent things about the later Police Academy films. Yeah, here's the disc. And inside we have a sticker which came on the shrink wrap. This also, like Pump Up the Volume, came in a shitty eco box, but I've swapped it. Yep, Salvage Steve Holland's career seems to be a bit weird, to say the least. I mean, he started his career doing weird 80s comedies like Better Off Dead and One Crazy Summer. Then he did a cartoon series called Eek the Cat in the 90s. And then he later went on to work for Nickelodeon, doing those more like live-action Fairly Odd Parents movies, which, I mean, one thing you can't call his career is boring. It's just kind of bizarre. So the next one is The Family Way. I was basically re-gifted this, but it's an absolutely fantastic film. It's very different to a lot of other sort of British sort of comedy films that came out in the 60s. It's sort of a comedy film meets a kitchen sink drama, and normally kitchen sink dramas are very hit and miss for me, but I really do like this one. And it's also really good as a comedy as well. Yep, it's a very interesting film. I'd highly recommend it if you've not seen it. I'm doing quite badly at selling you these films, to say the least. Anyway, here's the disc. Next one is From Correspondence. This is an Alfred Hitchcock film from 1940, the last Hitchcock film I wanted. I've not seen all his films, but I've seen a really, really good percentage of them, like 80% of his entire filmography. It's not too bad going. I wouldn't necessarily call this my favourite Hitchcock film, but it's still a really good film. I'd still highly recommend it. Here's the disc. Next one is Chris Morris's Jam. I'm a massive fan of Chris Morris. I love The Day to Day and Brass Eye and Four Lions. This is a sketch show he did in the early 2000s for Channel 4, and easily the best way I can describe it is basically almost like a weird, surreal nightmare. Although I'd recommend a video by Stu Bagfull. Stu Bagfull makes a really good point in. But the thing is with Jam is, if you took away the surreal imagery and stuff and some of the weirder stuff, a lot of the sketches wouldn't seem out of place in something like Monty Python. Like the most famous sketch to come from Jam was one where this couple has lizards coming out of the TV. And that sketch, kind of when I describe it, doesn't really sound too out of place from a normal sketch show, but I think it's just the way the show does it. It makes it feel very, very surreal and very, very odd. And also, it's very, very fucked up. A lot of sketches are really fucking like horrible to watch. In fact, it well and truly earned its 18 rating. In fact, I'm honestly kind of amazed this managed to get on network television at all. But of course, me being a sick bastard, I of course appreciate that. So I think if you're into like really weird shit, or if you're a fan of Chris Morris, I definitely would recommend Jam. But I don't know, it's kind of a very hard sell for people who don't know what to expect. But yeah, extras included inside this pack: one crashing airliner, 8 tons of geese, and a 50-foot plutonium bomb. So yeah, this DVD is probably the weirdest DVD I've actually got. In terms of the way the menu and stuff is structured. But that's the thing though with Chris Morris, a lot of Chris Morris's DVDs always kind of feel a bit different to lots of other DVDs. In fact, I swear Chris Morris kind of had a lot of control over the physical releases of his stuff. Because on the disc there's an option called I can't remember, I think it was called like forced viewing, where basically plays the disc on loop and basically all the transport controls are locked, so the only way you can stop it is to eject the disc. And also there's special versions of some of the episodes where they're basically edited in such a way that makes them impossible to watch. It's a really bizarre DVD set. I believe this DVD was originally released by VCI in 2003, I think, and that came in like a digibook, and I believe it had some stuff which you could only view by ripping the packaging apart to see it. This version was released by Channel 4, and it's the same master. The only difference is instead of having the VCI logo at the start, it has the Channel 4 logo at the start, which, yeah, that's a bit annoying. Yeah, the second disc has the series Jam, which is basically a slightly modified version of the original series of Jam that originally aired on 4 later, which was Channel 4's very sadly no longer around late night television block where they showed really, really weird stuff. They showed Jam on it, but the thing is they never showed the original Jam on 4 later, which is odd because it turns out Jam was actually screened about 10:30 in the evening, which, to be honest, I think is a bit too early, I would say, because this show really feels like one of those shows you'd watch after midnight, like after a few drinks. It just kind of feels like one of those shows. So I can kind of see why Jam was made, but essentially there's no point to watching Jam because it's basically just Jam only with slightly weirder editing. But mind you, Chris Morris was like a master troll, so who knows? Maybe that was the whole point. By the way, this was based on a Radio 1 series he did in the 90s called Blue Jam, which was basically surrealist sketches and weird ambient noises, basically. I've never listened to Blue Jam, but I really should at some point. So yeah. And then finally, I decided to put DVDs and Blu-rays together for this lot because this is a collection of Ken Russell films. Absolutely love Ken Russell. Ever since I saw The Devils, he's become one of my favourite directors, and not too long ago I did a little screening season of some of his films, and yep, he definitely earns his spot as one of my favourite directors. Ken Russell's films have very, very acquired taste. You're going to either love them or hate them, but I absolutely love them. So I've got 5 of his films here. The first one is Women in Love, based on D.H. Lawrence novel. His first proper breakthrough film. He did a lot of films prior, mainly for TV. He did a lot of films for a BBC series called Monitor, largely focused around painters and composers. But Women in Love was like his first proper breakthrough cinema release film. I'm not the biggest fan of costume dramas. Costume dramas have been a quite hit and miss for me. But this one's really good. One of the few properly compelling costume dramas. And of course, quite infamous. This includes the nude wrestling scene between Alan Bates and Oliver Reed. In fact, I'm honestly kind of amazed this was given a 15. I believe the VHS version was an 18, but when the DVD came out, it was given a 15. Yep, I won't call this my favourite Ken Russell film. In fact, out of all the ones I've seen, it's probably my least favourite, but 9 out of 10 is still really good going. There's the disc. There's booklet, which you get with a lot of BFI titles. I mean, it's not as extensive as the one that came with the Devils, but it's still really quite nice. And inside we have adverts for BFI titles. The 2 other Ken Russell sets, Great Passions and Great Composers, which I probably will get at some point, which includes some of his TV work. I think the Great Passions set has Dante's Inferno, which I've also seen, which is really good. And we've got another couple of films there. We've got Alan Clark at the BBC, which I should get at some point. The Firm, that's really good. And of course, The Devils is a masterpiece. Thing though with Ken Russell is he's known for being very, very surreal, and definitely a lot of his, especially with his slightly later films, kind of can attest to that. But this one is probably the most sane out of all his films I've seen so far. But really, the saneness is replaced by horniness. Like, this is like extremely horny as a film. In fact, I'm still amazed this managed to get a 15, to be fair. But yeah, it's a very good film and I'd highly recommend it. Next one is his follow-up film, The Music Lovers, based around Tchaikovsky. This is a fantastic film. I definitely would recommend it. Probably Ken Russell's most emotional film he's made to date. I say made to date because he sadly passed away back in 2011, so he can't make any more films. But yeah, it stars Richard Chamberlain, who Richard Chamberlain was a closeted gay man until the early 2000s, and he plays Tchaikovsky, who Tchaikovsky was also a closeted gay man. So a closeted gay man played by a closeted gay man, like, that's the most perfect casting in the world. But yeah, this is a very, very good film. Sadly, the DVD is a bit lackluster because it doesn't have any extras. And by the way, I don't think you can read that, but I'll have to put a disclaimer on the screen, warning you that there are going to be some spoilers, so you can skip this part if you don't want to film spoiled or you've not seen it before. But what's really stupid about this DVD release is the blurb is like really, really descriptive. But out of it's so descriptive, it gives away the fucking ending. Like, why? Like, I mean, I know it's based on real events and stuff, but if you've not seen the film before, why would you just... They just gave away the ending. Thankfully, I had seen the film before I got this, so, it didn't spoil it for me, but still, it's fucking stupid, if you ask me. And sadly, this release doesn't have any extras, although what's nice about it is it has a typo on the back. It says the aspect ratio is in 4:3. It isn't. The film was actually shot in 2351, and it's actually presented on the disc in anamorphic 2351. So it preserves the full aspect ratio, which is great. At least it's not a crappy pan and scan. Next one is Tommy, an absolutely fantastic film. I believe this is considered the first sort of major rock opera film, based on an album by The Who, about a deaf, mute, and blind kid who becomes a wizard at pinball, and basically a religion revolves around him. I believe Ken Russell was not the biggest fan of rock music, and he was more or less approached to direct the film because The Who really liked Ken Russell. And so he was more or less a hired-on director, but he had full creative control, and plus he really liked the story. I wouldn't recommend this as your introduction to Ken Russell's work, because the thing is, a lot of his films are very, very surreal, and that really caters to this film. But the story itself is already pretty damn surreal. It's just kind of Ken Russell kind of amplified it. But if you want to see Ken Russell in his purest form, I'd probably would recommend looking elsewhere. But it's still a great film. I'm not the biggest fan of musicals. I don't know why, because I've liked a lot of the musicals I've seen. But this one's really, really enjoyable. I guess it's not really a musical. It's not really musical in the sense that you'd call an opera a musical. But yeah, but very, very good film. And also, something that's surprising is Oliver Reed and Jack Nicholson can actually fucking sing, which kind of took me by surprise because it's their actual singing voices, and they're really good in some of the singing bits. The film is completely sung. The story's told through the visuals and through the singing. There's no dialogue. But yeah, here's the disc. This is the UK Blu-ray put out by Odeon, who are now known as Screenbound. And this one's out of print, but the US Blu-ray from Sony is still in print. The transfers, as far as I can tell, are pretty much identical between the two. The only difference is this one doesn't have the Columbia Pictures logo at the start. And also, what's nice about this one is the Sony Blu-ray is bare bones. It has no extras aside from a booklet. This one, although it doesn't have the booklet, has a fairly healthy selection of extras, which is really nice and I really should delve into. It's got a commentary by Ken Russell and Mark Kermode, which should be really fun. I've heard a lot of good things about Ken Russell's audio commentaries. And of course, obviously, I'm a big fan of Mark Kermode. I don't care if anyone doesn't like him. I absolutely love the guy. And also on that note, the Fiddle About song hasn't aged particularly well, because the original album was written by Pete Townsend, who is a nonce, in case you don't know. In the early 2000s, it was discovered he was using a child abuse website, and when he got caught, his excuse is so pathetic. It's laughable. He basically said, "I was doing research for a book on child abuse." And the best part is, 20 years later, that book still hasn't resurfaced. So yeah, the Fiddle About segment has not aged particularly well after that. But still, it's an absolutely fantastic film. And the next one is Listamania. This came out the same year as Tommy and also stars Roger Daltrey. Based around the composer Franz Liszt, who was the first major rock star composer. In fact, Beatlemania of the 60s, it was actually a play on Listamania. But yeah, Roger Daltrey is actually a really good actor in this. And thing is, even by Ken Russell standards, this is an absolute piss take. It really does feel like Ken Russell was taking the piss when he made it. It's absolutely insane, but fuck me, it's funny. I watched this with a couple of friends and I kind of regret not doing it with our webcams on because I was laughing my arse off throughout this film. It's very, very crude. I'll have to warn you right now, it's very, very juvenile. I mean, even look at the four corners of the poster, like, tell me what you see when you see the four corners. But yeah, if you want a proper like historical account of Franz Liszt, do not watch this. But if you just want a film, just have a good laugh with, watch this. In fact, this and Zardos I think would make a great double feature, especially after a few drinks. Oddly fitting since Sarah Kestelman appears in both. But yeah, kind of undersold it a bit. Is the disc. This is a kind of weird DVD. This was the cover artwork does look like a DVD released by Warner Brothers. It's a Warner Brothers film. So it looks like it was released by Warner Brothers, but it's actually not. It was released by Rick Wakeman, the musician. He did the score for this film and had a hilarious cameo. He released this film on DVD himself, and what's funny is the DVD actually opens with an advert for his YouTube channel, which was kind of funny. But yeah, this is also quite a nice DVD release in The first DVD release of this film in the UK came out in 2009, but unfortunately it was a non-anamorphic transfer, which is kind of annoying. Which is kind of weird, especially considering the fact that by 2009 most people had like widescreen TV sets, so why would a DVD that came out in 2009 be non-anamorphic? But that DVD had extras. The film was then re-released in America by the Warner Archive Collection with no extras but an anamorphic transfer. This has an anamorphic transfer and it also has the extras, so that's a very nice thing as well. And also, something vaguely odd is, despite the fact that it's a UK disc and was sold primarily in the UK, it's an NTSC disc as opposed to PAL, so the resolution's not as high. But it's still a nice looking transfer, and also it doesn't have PAL speed up. And also, despite the fact that it claims to be Region 2 locked, it's actually Region 3. So yeah. And then finally, a fantastic film, this Altered States. The covers are not that good, unfortunately, but mind you, Altered States has never had the best covers in the world. But yeah, this is a fantastic film. It doesn't really feel like a Ken Russell film. It feels a bit more like a Nicholas Roeg or David Cronenberg kind of film. But yeah, it's still a very, very good film and has very, very great sort of deep themes about sensory overload and the psyche. And also, it's one of the few. It's sci-fi horror, and it's one of the few horrors that genuinely did quite unnerve me a bit. It's very rare for a horror film to do that for me, but this is definitely one of them. I'd highly recommend Altered States. Again, I wouldn't fully recommend this as an introduction to Ken Russell's work, but it's still an absolutely fantastic film. And also, this was the debut film of the late great William Hurt, and he delivers a fantastic performance as well. But yeah, here's the disc. So yeah, that was it. That was everything. Until next time. So long for now.